Oh,
We need at least 2 more members for a quorum, so we'll be waiting. That's John. All right, that's. Hi, John.
Here comes John.
Okay. So who's missing? Oh, Michael. Okay. I'll give it another minute before it's actually, well, that clock says 7. Let's check this one. Okay. We have the quorum, or at least begin. I'll take with attendance. So, Ron Assini?
Here.
Yeah, okay. Nora Bucko?
Here.
John Sasso?
present.
John O'Neill, present. Okay. And we know Mark wasn't going to be able to make the meeting. We knew in advance anyway. He told us at the last meeting he wasn't going to be able to make it. And I understand that John Parsons, Jenna said that he's sick, so he won't be attending.
Yes.
So the only other person who might be joining in, I see we have a couple of guests as well, which is welcome. So we'll begin. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the September 28th meeting.
So moved.
So moved, and I see a second.
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 Okay. Any additions, corrections, or deletions to the minutes as presented?
No.
Seeing none, I'll take the roll call for a vote. It'll be Nora Bucko,
Yeah.
Ron Assini,
Yes.
John Sasso,
Yes.
John O'Neill, yes. So the minutes have been approved as submitted. And next is the recalc response to the Council on Aging letter. I don't know if it's looking for an actual official response, but just kind of like what's any first impressions or any comments people might want to make. And noted that Michael Coltman has joined us as well. Hi, Mike.
So John, what is it that we're looking here to do here? The intention of the feedback was to kind of give to the subcommittee that was reviewing the architectural plans to try to assess, whether or not things were incorporated, what was missing, kind of general feedback. I mean, I haven't, looked at the letter in any great detail. I was on the meeting where they kind of reviewed it, and a lot of the feedback seemed to be somewhat, general high level, like, things need to be accessible. We need to have parking. But I didn't see specifics of like, one of the things that I endeavored to do when I was reviewing these plans was to provide explicit feedback. Okay, hey, we need to have social space and it should be cordoned off, or we need to have offices here, or we're missing a dedicated computer room. So I was trying to be very specific, and I thought that was really what the subcommittee was really looking for, was explicit feedback that they could share with the architects so that could guide them a bit more in their kind of the detailed approach. I didn't necessarily see that. I'm not sure. And I know there was a comment about, well, there's no specific requirements for, we don't know how many people. And that's a different issue. But in terms of, general, hey, what's missing? I guess that would be my one piece of feedback, is we didn't really see that from them. And I guess I would have liked to have known, if there was something in the plans that has been presented thus far, again, knowing that the overall design isn't final, but in terms of priorities, what might be missing or what issues there might be, that would have been, I think, also pretty helpful and productive feedback to give to the team.
Okay. Anyone else? I guess I did read it several times, because first of all, I think, the council took, obviously a lot of time. This is a very serious issue, so I think we wanted to make sure we acknowledged that, and that we were, taking the input very seriously. I did wonder, similar to you, John, I was looking for, as we went out and we did our visits, I think one of the things we wanted to say is program-wise, and I think hopefully we'll be getting this input from UMass as well. Are there key program areas dedicated, that had space demands that hadn't been looked at or addressed? So that was like one of the first things that I was looking to see, and that wasn't where the focus was, understandably. Also, the fact that this is not the architectural design. This is a high-level thing, just give us kind of like a ballpark guesstimate of what things might look like with a particular building, as opposed to if things went forward. I think the town manager made it very clear that according to state regulations, that in fact, you'd have to go out to bid for an architect. And in fact, you would include that somebody who was skilled in working with senior centers would be high on the list of attributes to be looking when you're approving or selecting an architect. So that's kind of like, that's going to be there. So I hear that concern. The issue as far as, and I know Marilyn has certainly championed this quite eloquently in the past meetings, of educating ourselves more by, bringing in a consultant at some point to kind of like highlight as far as accessibility issues and issues around, soundproofing, all the kind of areas that you might look for in a building that's going to hopefully serve people with disabilities and older people. So that's, I don't know where it certainly seemed like, I know we were certainly amenable at our last meeting to that, and town manager seemed also, so I don't know where that lies at this point, but so
And this is Ron, John. I watched select board meeting yesterday, and I thought I heard Fidel mention that they've reached out to the state, and I don't know exactly what group within the state, but a state that looks at buildings that are going to be occupied by people with mobility issues and seniors, and to ensure that they would be sort of consultant for us as well too.
I think if I think they set a meeting. I thought it was November 1st.
Yeah,
where they're going to come in and talk to anybody that wants to listen to learn about some of the issues. And so yeah, you're right, Ron. Fidel did do that. And again, I think the meeting's November 1st. I haven't seen any more details on it, but that's what he mentioned last night.
Thanks, John. Yep.
And also, I understand they made the presentation as far as some of the alternative things that they were taking a look at. And I know also when I met with the town manager at his request, he indicated in the RFP that in fact, they reached out to just about every possible, landlord in the community, and none were, showed any, interest in selling their property or any way a long-term commitment with their property. And that was indicated by the fact that nobody responded to the RFP. And I think that's something that should be not taken lightly, the fact that there may not be many alternatives in the community, and we had best at least explore as much as possible. Not saying we go with the Walgreens, but we certainly should take that one very seriously if in fact that might be outside of even looking at town property. It looked like there was going to cost is going to be like twice as much for a new building on town property. And given the fiscal realities that the town's going to be facing in the future, especially with the Killam situation, I think that's also something that we need to, that needs to be taken into consideration. But Ron, you have your hand up again?
Yeah, listen, there are alternatives. They just cost a lot more money.
Right. No, yes.
So, yeah, if you want, if we want to spend $30-40 million, there are opportunities out there. If we're going to spend $25 million, that's what I heard last night. I thought it was a very informative meeting yesterday. There are alternatives. It's just going to cost money. And your note about the Killam School, it's at one or the other. It was pretty clear on the select board meeting yesterday. It's not one or the other. It's both. The town needs both. 50% of the population is going to be affected potentially by these two sites. So they're both priorities.
Yeah, and the Killams and long awaiting.
Yeah.
My kids went to Killam. I know. So.
Yeah.
Okay, Marilyn, you want to?
There we go. In terms of the letter, I think it's fair to characterize it as we gave you the feedback that was responding to the information we've received so far.
Okay.
And drawing on the expertise that the council does have, and not trying to not step into areas that perhaps either there's not enough information or it's not that we're the right experts. And we talked about that last meeting. None of us are experts. So that was, I think, a fair, and anyone else on the council, if you think I'm characterizing this incorrectly, please correct me. I don't want to be speaking for the council without council backing us. So it's sort of just my opinion, but my experience with this was we said, what have we been given for information? And what can you say based on it? And we thought there were quite a few concerns that we addressed that have not yet been fully addressed. Mm-hmm. And we're open to the dialogue on this. We're not saying, no way, Jose. We're saying we don't have enough information. Anyone else on the council disagree with me? Please correct me. No? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
I'm also on the Council on Aging, and I would characterize it that way. I think, we have a lot of questions, and we were hoping, I was hoping personally that this would be a joint meeting, and I do hope at some point we do have a joint meeting so that we can all discuss the different points, because you are all at a different place than we are. We had a meeting in September where at that point, the possibility was that we were going to rent it. Well, 4 weeks later, now the possibility is that we can purchase it. So again, there was a lot more information, but again, we didn't have as much information as we anticipate we will get as part of this conversation and determining the next steps.
I also, should add at this point is that I had indicated to the town manager, among others, that I was unhappy with the way things had gone up until a point a few weeks ago, because I read in the Chronicle for the first time about, the possible purchase. So it wasn't like, and the timeline was fairly, was a rapid one. And we had this process and we had the UMass thing. So I certainly took that very seriously, the fact that a process that we thought and fully expected was going to play itself out over a more extended period of time was accelerated. And I could understand, some of the reasons why. And then when the alternatives, basically the presentation, I guess, that was at the select board last night was what the town manager walked me through. So that helped. But I certainly, if I hadn't had that opportunity, and I was just a member of the council, or another member of the recalc before they had a chance to hear some of this, I could see where people would not be happy. That's the way I started my meeting with the town manager, saying, "I'm not a happy camper." And he says, "I heard that." So I hear what people are saying. I certainly sympathetic to that, and hopefully, because the council, I do see your hand, Ron.
No. Zoom has this new feature that you raise your hand and it tells you, "Hey, do you want to raise your hand?" And you can actually hit the button. So I was trying to play with it there. So.
Okay. All right. So are there? Since the people who are here, the three people who are here who represent the council, even though this isn't a joint meeting, if there, anything else that you would want to say to recalc, I mean, we certainly would welcome it. And okay, Marilyn, you have your hand up, and then I guess is it Karen? Okay, Marilyn.
Mute.
You're muted.
I know, thank you. Just a personal observation, because again, this is not something we've had a chance to talk beyond what we did with the letter, since that filled our last meeting. But a personal observation is that I know solving the parking problem of Reading is not the mandate of this committee, and that's well and good. But I get concerned when I get asked to make apples and apples comparisons between places that have lots of parking built into what the scenario might be. Say Simon's Way, parking there presumably would not be the challenge, and I could be wrong, but on the surface it appears to not be the added expense. If you want to compare it's 6 or 8 or 10 million more there to downtown, I think you have to either subtract out the value of all that parking out of the Simon's Way, because that should be set outside, or factor in some hypothetical costs, because we keep saying we know that parking's a problem. We know we have to do something about it. There are lots of creative solutions, and I applaud all of that, but it's going to cost money. And that should be added to the understood cost of making that a viable center, I think. But that's my personal observation on that. You asked for any additional input, so I'll throw that one in.
No, and I think, at least in my conversation with the town manager, that came up, that you would have to add in that factor. And I think that consideration is certainly something that the town is taking seriously. Karen, and then we'll go to Nancy.
Again, my opinion doesn't necessarily speak for the Council on Aging, but I'm speaking for my own opinion. I think, like you spoke about, John, things were accelerated. And so as a result of that, we did have a lot of questions. And at this point, it appears that there's 4 different options. One is do nothing, which no one wants. The second one is to expand the Pleasant Street Center. And I guess at the Lunch and Learn session, that opportunity was presented with a plan and with a cost. We didn't see it necessarily. We got it like the day before. So I do agree with you about the timing of everything. The third option is to purchase Walgreens and make it an excellent senior center in the center of town. And the fourth one would be Simon's Way. So I think we really need to have a conversation, and all of the players, recalc, COA, Board of Selectmen, about which one is the most cost effective, which one will serve the community the best. And so I do think that there are still so many questions, and I'm not sure that they will be answered tonight.
Right. Nancy?
And thank you. And to piggyback off of what Karen just said, if you hadn't watched the select board meeting last night, then you wouldn't know that there was more opportunity for parking that was discovered and was discussed last night. So to kind of echo a lot of what's being said tonight, we don't have clear parameters around every option. We do not fully understand every option that we have before us. And I think if we are able to Marilyn's point, have apples compared to apples and really be able to see what our options are, understand not just the cost perspective, but viability perspective, I think we'll be in a better situation to make more informed decisions. And unfortunately, we're just not there yet.
Okay. John?
Ron's hand was up further.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I just want to echo what Nancy was saying. Yeah, there was a lot of things that were revealed at the select board meeting yesterday, and the additional 12 parking spaces that no one knew about that were attached to the current senior center. I thought that was pretty interesting. And, I know things are moving rapidly, and I like the way what Mark addressed it during select board yesterday. Walgreens is a wild card. It's just something that came in, and we just have to seriously look at it as a viable option. I can remember the first day I started on this in November last year was, what about the Walgreens building? Then it was kind of like the dog that caught the car. It was like, we got the Walgreens building as an option. What do we do with it? And look, at the end of the day, this is a capital expense that the town is going to go after. And if there's an opportunity to get something in the center of town as a showcase for the center of town, it's got to be seriously looked at, whether it's for the senior center or something else. But
that's so. Now I'll get back to you. I see.
John, I do have to say something. There are 5 Council on Aging members in this, and we were not posted as a joint meeting, from what I understand.
Oh,
so one of us has to leave.
Because do associate members count as part of that quorum? Because Nancy, you were an associate.
Probably you could tell us, Gene.
Yeah, Nancy and I are associates.
Okay, so I think that makes a difference.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Jean's shaking her head. Yes, is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. I didn't want to leave.
Yeah, and I see Sally's on. Okay, John Sasso.
So, interesting. I just want to draw us back a little bit. Clearly, again, Walgreens has become a wild card, and certainly something that's been thrown onto the scene here. I just want to tear back to the recalc charter, right? So the recalc charter wasn't necessarily to define a specific solution. The recalc charter was to collect information and present it back to the select board in terms of a recommendation for what to pursue and kind of the information that supports that. And so I am still of the opinion that that's our role and our job. Now, I understand that, we've been dragged into Walgreens and comparative assessments of sites, but I guess I really have to say that is not really our charter, and it really does fall into the category of feasibility study. Now, having said that, we can't be an ostrich and put our heads in the sand over that either, because it's in front of us and we have to deal with it. So I guess I just want to remind ourselves that recalc is going to continue to pull information together. I mean, obviously, I feel there's some really valuable information I'm hoping to see from the work that UMass has done in that study. And I think that'll give us some more guidance on kind of where the community is looking. But in terms of specific solutions, other than the fact that, there's been this approach, this opportunity presented, it's not a recalc decision. I guess I just want to remind ourselves of that. This is not a recalc decision. Thank you, Michael. We are our job is to pull information together and present it and give enough information so people can then make good decisions. That doesn't mean we're not going to support the activities around potentially looking at Walgreens. It is the reason why I was a little bit stressful up front that we need to be able to share feedback on the details. And I know, Marilyn, you were very adamant about making sure the COA saw the same information we did. And so I certainly hope you are getting those same handouts and information that's been put together. Because that's the only thing we're working off of. We're not working off of anything new that you don't have, as far as I understand. So I really do think that this is still a team effort. And I guess I'll end with, I thought there was a plan for a joint COA recalc meeting in the near future. So I certainly would encourage us to figure that out and also figure out what that is. I think it's related to the survey results, to be honest with you. But I see Jenna shaking her head. I think that's true. So again, I just want to make sure we keep that in the back of our mind, that our job is really to collect the information and to present it in a manner so that people can make good decisions.
Okay. And you certainly are correct as far as what the mandate is of this committee. And this was something that was given to us, the Walgreens thing, to take a look at as part of our mandate. And one of the key parts of our mandate too is to make a recommendation as far as should it be an intergenerational center or just a senior center? And we have not weighed in on that. That's still something that we haven't come up with any recommendation, because I think we're waiting for the UMass. I was really encouraged by the fact that a lot of people in their 50s and 60s have taken the survey. So I think that's going to be very helpful. At least I know for me, when I'm weighing what kind of recommendation to make for that, what a lot of the people in the community think. What do they want? Michael, because you haven't had a chance to speak yet. Michael, and then we'll get back to you, Marilyn.
Yeah.
So, I was watching the select board meeting, and but I think John made the key point that the recalc was supposed to be coming up with what are all the programs and activities and functions and other things that were necessary for the new center. When Walgreens came on the scene, it sort of morphed into, well, how much could Walgreens accomplish of the critical, subcritical next steps? How much could it do? And without the feedback from UMass and the surveys and all the other things, I think we've done a reasonable job at looking at some of that, and Walgreens can accomplish a lot of things that are very important to the senior center or community center. But without the full feedback, I'm not sure how much farther we can go. The alternatives, the addition to the senior center, which is something that I just saw for the first time in micro vision on the select board screen, it's really high. It's not apples to apples or anything. It's probably square foot to square foot.
Yeah.
And the same with Simon's Way. So the one thing that I would say that was presented in the select board that's probably very accurate is estimates of the dollar figures to do those things. And that's something that's been one of my concerns for a long time, is that to accomplish a Lexington style community center is probably not in the cards for Reading at the moment. And that's really, I haven't gotten to review the COI report.
Hey, Marilyn?
Just a couple of short points. And maybe I've had COVID for the last week, so I've not done the best job of keeping up with my email. So maybe it's sitting there and I just haven't found it, but I don't know if the packet got mailed out. You mentioned, who was it? John Sasso, I think, was mentioning you're hoping we were getting all the communications. Jenna, don't know if you mailed us the packet.
Yeah, so I sent the agenda But as I was speaking with Jean this week in the meeting, I didn't think sending all of the information out in advance to COA would be the best because I didn't want people to get confused with the joint meeting and have a quorum show up at the meeting tonight. So I was going to send all of the information to you afterward, after this meeting. Because because we had a lot to discuss tonight and I didn't want people to be confused. So, but I will send you all of the information after the meeting for sure.
In general, just as it's helpful, I'm sure, to the members here, it would be useful to be able to see the packet beforehand, just so we can collect our thoughts and make good use of the time. To see it afterwards is just not as functional. And I thought that was what we had agreed upon, but I understand
Right.
there was a lot of confusion about the joint meeting. And the other is just a technical point. We actually need 6 to hit quorum. So even if we were all members, we're still golden here tonight. But it's helpful to know. Thank you. I didn't realize that associates didn't even count against it. So thank you very much. I'll crawl back in my COVID cave.
Okay, and I understand because, you know, the change and, whoops, that's my dog, joint meeting or, you know, what happened there. But it had been, I didn't know that you didn't receive the packet, Marilyn.
Yeah, we did. I know.
You know, so
It's an ongoing challenge. If we could just make it, because we do meet jointly periodically, and we're certainly both following it. If we could agree that we could have the packet beforehand as well, it just would be helpful. And if it's going to get mailed, it's going to get mailed. So it's not extra work, really. It's just timing.
well, also because at any meeting, you know, anybody from the public, especially we welcome people from the Council on Aging. So all the more reason, and we not only to sit in, but to be able to participate, as you know. We welcome the input on an ongoing basis.
I'll forward it right now so you have it.
Thank you very much.
So John, is there anything else we need to do on this subject? I know the topic was response. I'm not sure that there's a necessary need for a formal response by any stretch of the imagination.
And I agree, John, but I think now, hopefully, that if members of ReCal hadn't read it in depth, and that now that they will take that opportunity to do so, I think that was part of my thing, is that I think people needed to really, because I know I've been guilty at times of not reading everything that's in my packet. You know, I will admit that, and because especially this time there was a lot.
Actually, if you don't mind, just a quick question. I actually didn't see the letter in the packet.
Jenna?
Do you know if that got the
I
COA
didn't
letter?
either, so.
Yeah. Same.
Okay, so
I know I like I said, I actually heard it when I was actually listening to COA the other day. So that's why I kind of knew it was in it, but I actually haven't seen a physical copy of it at the moment.
okay.
So if someone can track that down and send that out to us, that would be helpful,
Okay.
just so we have it for our own records.
Mhm. See Jenna looking it up. Because it would have something that would have come to Maryland, from Maryland, to me and others. Right.
I sent it to you, John,
But
on
you,
behalf of the council.
I thought you sent it to other people as well. You didn't send it to staff?
I sent it to, we did send it. We sent it to, it went to a few others, but didn't go to all the members of this. It
Right,
went-
but
It did go to a few others. It went to,
right, but generally our understanding is we don't submit things directly to all the members.
Yeah, we don't send out materials directly to the other members. It goes to staff and then it's up to staff it just keeps it simple and clean for us.
That's
hang
how
on,
we're
I can
instructed.
tell you who I sent it to. Give me a minute.
It's okay. It just sounds like we need to get it sent back out to us.
Can I think we need to move on to the next topic.
Yep.
All right, so if you can make sure, why don't you send it to Jenna again, if you,
All right.
okay? I
Yep.
appreciate that. Thank you, Marilyn. Okay, so we will.
I
move
have
on.
it. I have it. I'm forwarding it right now.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, then updates and presentation for the select board. My God, I was impressed by what John and Ron had come up with.
Well, I've made some more mods to it. So is it okay if I share my screen and walk through this briefly?
Sure.
And yeah, Ron, thanks. This looks so much better with the new format. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess I should just preface by saying this is clearly, it's still a work in progress, but I want to just remind myself, when is this due for the select board packet? This is for the 25th of October. So when is the final due? Jenna and Jean, if one of you guys could let me know.
I can jump in on that one. We try and get everything to the town manager's office the Wednesday before. The packets go out the Thursday before. So it will be next Wednesday is the 19th.
Okay, all right, awesome, thank
A
you.
week from today.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so yeah, so Ron and I spent some time, maybe more time than we wanted, putting this together. And I have to say, just as a preface, one of the things that I did in pulling some of the pieces that I had together was I had gone back to the benchmarking work that we did. And actually, you probably saw a summary write-up that got sent around to everybody. And that's really the basis for some of the data that we pulled out. I really felt kind of remiss from not having done that earlier, but it was painfully obvious when we put this together that was kind of a missing piece. So I have tried to consolidate this a bit. There's still some open items, and as we go through this, I'll highlight what those are. This is a open forum for comments and questions. So if you do, please stop me as we go through, and we'll we can make updates. I do wish Mark was here, because I certainly would appreciate his kind of guidance on what he thinks the select board wants to see, because there's a lot of information here. And we really struggled with trying to keep it concise. But I think the other piece that is really important to say here is that this is still, we've done a lot of work, but there's still a few more things that need to be done. And so I know that there's a question about recalc sunsetting at the end of November, and maybe that'll happen, but I do think it's important to reflect on all the things we have done and the things that are still open. So this was just an updated slide of the milestones. It's the one that was in the slide presentation before. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but if anybody has any questions, let me know. I was actually hoping to get, I know we don't have the data back from UMass, but do we have at least a final number of how many responses we've received thus far, or that they?
Yeah, I just emailed you that. It's let me not misspeak, and I'll quote it exactly from the email I just sent you. $1,472. About a 7% response rate.
Okay. Pretty good.
That's everything, paper and electronic.
Sure. Awesome, thank you. So this is the same slide we presented last time. It's just why should we be doing this? So I didn't really feel anything changed in this particular slide at the moment. At least, there might be some new data that we get that changes this, but I think for the moment, this is still relevant. I really wanted to put together a slide that talked about the deficiencies in the current center. I got a couple pictures, and Jenna, thank you very much for forwarding them along. I would like, if possible, to get a few more images here to go with kind of the list of deficiencies. I think it's important to remind people, again, we've talked about why we're doing it, but here's a kind of more tangible. I think one of the things you'll see in this presentation is we've tried to make it a little bit more image friendly, so that we're just not looking at words all the time. So I think pictures really help. So I was thinking a couple more images, would be helpful to the situation. Like the offices in the hallway in the back upstairs, the office in the program room, the nurse and social worker office, the hallway waiting area. Those would be really neat images to add to this as a, just to, emphasize why these things are the way they are. Michael.
I think it'd be great to note in the non-dividable multi-purpose room, either a square footage or number of people that can be seated there.
Capacity, yeah.
Yeah, capacity.
Okay. Thank you. Jean?
Yeah, so the your note about nurse and social worker, she's not a social worker, she's a senior caseworker.
Thank you.
And I believe the great room is 700 square feet.
We had been told 600, but perhaps it's 700.
Maybe 700 square feet, question mark, and we can try and verify that.
Okay. All right, great, thank you.
I think partly it may also depend on whether you include the reception area and the kitchen.
Right, I think we're just talking about, counting ceiling tiles in that area where it's considered the great room.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
that's
including the kitchen, not including the reception area.
Yep. Yeah, I would think that would be the right approach. Okay.
And, I also wanted to say, I watched the meeting last night too, and heard some concerns, and we've heard concern. This is a 140-year-old building. It's the oldest building in the town of Reading.
I heard that too.
I cannot emphasize enough that taking a building like this and putting a modest amount of money into it back in 1993, 30 years ago, to convert what was a fire station. It was actually the town hall, the fire station, and the police station originally.
Yeah.
Town hall was the second floor. Fire station is obviously the first floor. And in the basement, there's still some jail cells. That was the police station. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to think that this building was intended for a time going back 140 years. And so retrofitting it to what it is now 30 years ago, even imagine what's changed in 30 years. There's just so much to address with heating, ventilating, and cooling, and mechanical systems, and on and on and on. It's like any kind of and the historic aspect of this. It's not just the history of the building, the architecture of the building. It's a building of great merit.
It's on the National Historic Register, right, Jean?
State and national.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this architect that designed this building also designed the Highland Street School, which later became the Reading Public Library. So it's significant on so many fronts.
Yeah, I always think about it as a homeowner. Every time you go to pull something apart, you find something. I can't even imagine what you're going to find if you start pulling this thing apart. But
yeah, and you also would never design a building that the parking's in the back and this long runway of a ramp that leads people to the front door. That you would never design a building like that. I think that ramp from the parking lot to the entrance is deficient as well. Access to the building it's okay, but I don't know if it's 100%. And I would say that the heating and cooling system, that the mechanical systems are, the best we have, but the the ability to have individual controls in each, it doesn't exist.
Well, I wasn't intending to make this the, exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think this is good.
okay, I want to keep moving. This is an interesting slide. People may want to take a minute and try to digest this. COA had a meeting a week or so ago when they were discussing what we were just talking about. But prior to that, they were given a report from Elder Services on usage at the senior center. I have to tell you, every person I've spoken to in the town about this whole process, the first question they ask me is, well, how many people are using the center today? What's the expected increase in usage? This was really helpful data to look at. I realize it may not necessarily reflect every single usage, but I think it was a really good report to have. And I'd like to talk a few minutes about this. But just so people understand, and Jenna, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So what you're looking at here in this chart are, support services total are, the interactions with the nurse and the senior caseworker, and I think Amy's included in that. And the difference between duplicated and unduplicated, if I read this correctly, was unduplicated are the number of specific individuals, and duplicated is the number of interactions or contacts. So maybe somebody had 2 meetings with one person, that would be two duplicated and 1 unduplicated. Is that how I read it?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So I'll just let folks think about that for a minute. And then the other thing that people have been asking about is, where are we relative to projections? So Fidel was talking about getting information from the enrollment study. So this chart here is an extract of the data from the enrollment study that shows the population over the next, basically, well, from here, over the next 10 years. And certainly only in 5-year increments, but just to give folks an idea of where that population growth and increase is going to be. The other thing I pulled out, the first thing was from the UMass report. This talked about the use of the center in terms of, and you can read it said that where's the largest percentage of people that are using the center from an age perspective. I thought this was an interesting quote. It was one of the few quotes in the actual report that dealt with specific usage and demographics. The other thing that I pulled out was a bullet from the enrollment study report. And by the way, there's probably about 30 assumptions that are in that report. The first like 3 pages of the report are a ton of assumptions that they use. But the interesting piece, which this shouldn't surprise anybody, is that they were talking about migration outflows out of the town, where the populations are going. And the interesting piece was the second largest migration outflow is in the 70+ age group, which, again, I don't think that is a surprise. So what does all this mean? I think that's really the question, and I'm not entirely sure what this all means at the moment. But I do think it's important for us to get a better handle on some of this. Where is the senior center pre-pandemic level values? What are they supposed to be? Where are we turning people away from programs? That was a discussion we had earlier in our conversations about yoga or fitness classes, where we were pushing, we weren't able to accommodate the number of seniors that we wanted. I can tell you this question is going to come up. Well, why are we only serving this small percentage of seniors? And I suspect part of the answer is going to be a lot of people are going out of town because we don't have a center that can attract them. But there's a whole bunch of information that a whole bunch of questions that come out of this that I certainly still don't have the answers to. But this is my opinion, and I'd certainly be interested on the feedback from the committee. I think this is important to present. I think it's important that we put this in front of people and say, these are the types of dynamics and issues that we're trying to deal with here. And I'm certainly, I think we need to come up with, well, what does this mean? I'm still not sure I know what it means. Comments, thoughts, input?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised by the unduplicated number. In fact, the unduplicated number, because I've run against this, in programs that I've managed in the past, that it's really hard to come out with a unduplicated across services. So even though you say like say 359 for June, the fact that some of the people in the recreation are also as unduplicated are also in the exercise, undoubtedly, in the other categories too. So generally it says the number of unduplicated people is low. Now the big question is, what was it pre-pandemic? I agree. That it'd be very helpful to know, especially if we had unduplicated numbers. But given the elder population, this says there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but part of it is the building wasn't functional. We saw that during the pandemic, because there was only one entrance, you had to wait until one event or exercise or whatever was finished and people left before anybody could go in. So it wasn't functional in that regard. And also staffing. I think that's going to be, I think all along we now got some additional staff time for the center, but it probably needs significantly more, because to be able to get activities going and generated, even with the limited facility, you need staff support to do that. And when you have like the director of human services / senior services having to do some of the direct service work on a daily basis because the nurse is out and the case manager is sick or whatever, which happened several times in recent months, I mean, that's just not acceptable. That you don't have any depth as far as the staff. So the staff's been really under.
I definitely think we as a community have really short shrifted. I mean, this has been my opinion since day one, that the budget and staffing and the programmatics of all this, it's more than just the building. I think I've probably said that about 30 times during our meetings. So I definitely agree that there's a lot to this. And John, I think you're right. I don't know what the back and forth are. I mean, these are data. This is data from this year, by the way. So this is 2022. This is post-pandemic data. Since this, and now obviously June, July, August, that's summertime data, but there was a statement made by the gentleman, I forget his name, that was presenting the information that said we are getting close to near pre-pandemic levels. So I'm not sure how far further that is. I just think we need to be prepared and understand what the implications of this really is. And I think we'll get some more information when we see the survey results. But I think we also need to, go down the path that you suggested, which is, well, what are the other items that could be impacting this? Jean, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. My main point was going to be, to look at the trends before the pandemic to get a really accurate view of what's going on, because I think the pandemic really put everything into a completely upside down mode. And so the other thing that from the staffing point of view is the work that we're doing now with the ARPA funds is more outsourcing of programs. Jenna can speak a little bit more to it. They had the first Wellness Wednesday today at the library. We've had many more bus trips. So in place of the resources that land in the budget, now with this additional funding through ARPA, we're doing supplemental services and programming. Yeah. And the people who are running it, like Jenna, don't show up in the elder services budget. And the lunch and learn that we had at the end of the month in September, Jenna and I worked very much on that. So we don't really show up in the budget either. So it is very different because of so many things to be able to measure this and quantify this in a way I think you're trying to get to. So it might be worth, I don't know, somehow factoring that in.
Right, but those things, like the opera monies, Gene, that's, one time. That's not coming back. And
Correct, but
and
it's a supplement to this. If we're going to look at the budget and say we don't, and your point is a good one, comparative to other communities, the budget is pretty thin in Elder and Human Services. But by the same token, there's other funding now with ARPA that's going to be good for 2 years. And I just think that's worth noting someplace.
Yeah, I have some slides later on that do some more community comparison work. I guess the reason I put this up here again is just that there's been a clear request, at least from my perspective, and others may disagree, that they want to see some numbers. And, I think the problem is when we present numbers, people are going to interpret them however they're going to interpret them. And I think we need to be prepared to kind of provide some rationale and information about what they mean, and what we think they mean. I guess that's my point.
Yeah, and I think this slide, people should see it in conjunction with the comparisons with other communities that are spending on their budgets, because the two then do dovetail and tell a similar story.
Yeah. Well, we can tie that together. Marilyn.
Just as a practical matter, because I know since Jane had the system put in My Senior Center, I think it's called, is the system that's used to generate these reports and to track how many people are in the building for what purpose. And a constant struggle she had was to get everybody to use their card. Some people faithfully use, it's a little plastic scan card, and then you click in, why are you here? A lot of people don't like to do it, and she would chase them. She was really relentless, but it's hard to get 100%. It's just one thing. And another thing just to bear in mind, and I did bring this up at the council meeting when this was shown last time, is that some of those numbers are also limited just by what the capacity of the current building is, and getting back to that staffing issue. With only so many staff and only so much room, the numbers might not be bigger, because where would you put them, and we don't have a lot of documented quantitative info on that, but this is to bear it in mind.
This is not any criticism at all, just the opposite. I think we're pointing out that it's amazing what people were able to do there.
Yeah, no, I'm not taking it as criticism.
Okay,
you were talking about how to make sure that people understood what the numbers do and don't mean. So I'm just offering these things as that they play into understanding the numbers.
Right.
It shouldn't be that they assume only 300 whatever would come if we built it. Well, you can't make that leap. So I'm just throwing out a few things from 10 years of watching Jane work with this system, and other towns too. I mean, it's inherent everywhere. There are people that just don't want to scan their card and don't want to tell you why they're there. But there are plenty who do too, but it's just not 100%. And Jane always put a caveat on these reports saying this does not necessarily reflect 100% of the utilization.
Yeah, no, I do have a note about that here as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Michael.
The other thing is, it's not really, I mean, this is current year data, and especially for this population, I'm not sure that this is post-pandemic data really. I think a lot of seniors are probably still pandemic wary.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point.
But the other thing is that I'm not sure, so for instance, the meals total, is that, 50% of capacity, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's no, I mean, there's a lot of questions. Like I said, this is interesting information. People can look at it in different ways and come to their own conclusions. There are a lot of questions like that. I mean, there is some detail underneath these. So these are summary data, Michael. The report actually breaks out, at least for some of these, it breaks out what they were. So meals total, I think there's probably like 6 or 7 line items underneath it with individual I think one of them might have been a birthday party. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff underneath there. So it is a summary of particular things. So, but in terms of capacity, I don't think there's any assessment of that.
Right. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. All right, I'm going to move on.
Great deal, great information.
Yeah, I'm going to move on, and folks can think a little bit more about this, but I do think it's a valuable information to put together. I don't want to stop from touting on horn a little bit about this. We actually did spend time putting together a plan, and we tried to really walk through how we were going to engage the community. We wanted to make people aware of what we were doing, and we actually used it as our work plan. So I don't really want to spend a lot of time, but I thought the best way to convey this is to show the different activities we did within the plan, and some images of what they were. I'm not going to spend any more time on that than that, because we are going to dive into some of these in a little bit more detail in the next couple slides. So I did put together a slide. This is kind of based on a summary of the stuff that was in the last newsletter about the community forums. Again, I thought this was important to share that, we did actually spend time talking to the community. We held a number of forums. We kind of solicited information. They wanted better communication. And then they kind of gave us feedback on, Reading in general, what a center would look like, and then some specific needs. Again, not necessarily to go through this in any great detail, but I just wanted to present it as a summary. One of the things I don't have, which I guess will be in the final UMass report, is kind of the summary from some of the focus group work that was done separately. So just as a highlight, so if somebody, whoever's presenting this just should mention that in addition to the forums, UMass did, I think, 4 focus groups as well. I don't really have any feedback or data from that, so I wasn't really able to put anything together. So whether we need to do that or not is another question. I think we have enough information here to present. So, but just as a comment that I did mention that we did, I think here we talk about, I'm sorry, right here, the forums, forums and focus group 7. So that's listed there. And then the next point, I'll put the data in. That was 1472. I'll go back and confirm that. Again, just that we actually spent time on this. We put together a 24-question survey. Kind of the general was available online in paper format for completion by phone. These were the areas. We sent a postcard to everybody in the community, and we got. I know Jean just told me the number. I'll go back and double check whatever it is, 1472 or whatever. And so I just put an image of the slot survey. And again, nothing more. It sounds like the day that we're doing this presentation, UMass is going to be in as well. So that'll be an interesting night, I guess. So the next section on this talks about the benchmarking. So we actually went out and surveyed a number of communities. We looked for folks that were either having just done this process, were in the process, and had, were kind of comparable to Reading. So I have a lot of backup slides on this. But I tried to consolidate this. So if these couple slides look way too busy, then please feel free to criticize. But I wanted to kind of, the alternative is to, instead of having 2 slides or 3 slides, I'd have 7. So I didn't think having 7 slides was the appropriate approach. I thought it'd be better to kind of hammer this down a little bit smaller. So I did talk about, we did visit 15 centers. 12 of them were senior only centers. There are 4 local communities that are in the process of either building or planning a new center. we did look, well, there's some cost data that I've actually pulled out. And so we did look at new versus renovation and what the new construction per square foot costs were based on some of the more recent centers. I can put a slide up on that. I don't want to, if people have questions on that, I don't want to go into it right now, but I do have a slide that shows historical costs for some of the centers that have been built in the area recently, built or renovated for that matter. This is always where I put together some of the comparison for center operations. The average community budget, peer community budget, is about $860,000, where we're at about $250,000, if I remember correctly, for Reading. The average building site that we looked at on these particular communities was about 19,300 versus, and these are gross square footages, versus 5,700 for Reading. And the average peer community staff is 14 full and part-time. I forget how many we're at here in Reading, so I left it as XX. I don't know if it's 4 or 5 or where we are, but I'd like to fill that number in, obviously. Sorry. So all of the centers that we visited have transportation options in place. They charge, or they ask for donations, or depending on the service, they're free. And then the other thing is that on average, centers have about 55 spaces, 5 of which are handicapped. Again, these are averages based on the data that we collected. And then the other thing I added here.
Gene put in 6 full-time employees for Red. Thank you, Gene.
Okay. The other thing I did is, so this is a little bit innocuous, but there was a survey where everybody checked off what each community had for building features. So this was the yes/no list for the ones that we surveyed. Some of them didn't have checkoffs, so obviously they're not listed. But I mean, they all had bathrooms and they all were wheelchair accessible. They all had admin and program staff offices. So you can kind of see the the majority of them did not have showers. So this was kind of a perspective of what the building features were that were in the centers that we surveyed. Also talked about, again, in the summary, food prep and meals. 10 centers are providing weekday lunch meals. 4 of them have a chef on staff. Most charge a nominal fee. 6 of them prep meals on site, 7 did not. So the interesting thing is, even those with kitchens didn't always necessarily say, at least in the report, that they were doing meals on site directly. And they may be like reheating or things of that nature, for all I know. Programmatic, I thought this was interesting. All the centers report being able to run multiple programs. Most of them reported having to cap programs depending on what center it was and what program it was. It did vary, but I think the majority in the survey said, yes, we have to do some capping. Most of the centers were run from a central location, and most of them offered some sort of intergenerational programs, even if they were only a senior center. So I thought that was another interesting piece. And then this last thing, this is a list of what the current center is missing based on the peer community. So this isn't saying what we at the Pleasant Street Center are missing. This is what they reported, saying, hey, what's missing from your center. So it may not be as much of value for us, but I thought there was some interesting points. I know we talked about a washer or dryer as one thing. That was something that a couple folks that indicated was missing. Commercial kitchens, a hair salon, outside activity space, evening hours. So these were some things that they highlighted as issues that they felt were missing from their current center. And then the last slide on this section really was, this is guidance that we solicited from them, kind of the open-ended question guidance of what is it that you would tell us to do if you were to build a new center? What are the things that we should do? And again, their opinions, but I think there's some value in them. I actually thought one of the most important ones, and this I think is something really maybe for elder services and COA and the town to talk about, is establishing a trust obtaining more grants and doing some fundraising and capital to cover furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Apparently, based on all of the stuff that I've seen and read, the majority of these centers, even when they build something new or renovate, appear to have developed some sort of a outside funding mechanism to pay for some of these things. I guess I would say this is a recommendation I would endorse wholeheartedly, to give whatever we end up with. I think there's always going to be expenses like that may not necessarily be in the budget, and to have the ability to support that from outside is I think a value add. And I've read that in probably 3 or 4 different places in some of these construction projects that have occurred. And I think Winchester, actually, if you read Winchester's site, they have a whole committee set up that manages that whole process. Jean.
Oh, yeah, thanks. So I know when I went to Arlington, they made a point of saying that, and it's typically a friends group. We as public employees have to be very careful and have a lot of rules about what we can and can't do when it comes to fundraising. But an outside group, like a friends group.
Right. No, yeah, no. So I know, like the Friends of Reading Public Library, they do that. So I was thinking the exact same thing, Friends of the Senior Center or Friends of Reading COA or whatever. I just think that's something that we don't have to wait for that. In fact, I would say it's something that I know. Actually, there's a town meeting article on a COA trust fund that's being added from somebody that donated some money. So I think things like that are absolutely worth pursuing.
Yeah, that's John Parsons' family.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I did not. Okay.
Yeah, so I think this idea of and I think we heard that from a lot of places, that there's another outside group that has the ability to do the fundraising, and that sits somewhere else, so that we're not blurring those lines of what we can and can't do as public employees.
No, completely understand. I think it was something that, at least from my perspective, made total sense. All right, and then this was an interesting slide to put together. I tried to grab as many pictures as I could, just to show. So these are some of the things that we saw when we went and visited these sites. Again, nothing to dwell on, but just so folks kind of see, we did actually go out and look and see what else is out there for other senior and community centers in the area. So we also thought that it would be worth putting a slide or two in here regarding the Walgreens site subcommittee. Again, while not our specific purview, we have been asked to work on this. So we put together a few slides on this just to say what we did. Obviously, we did visits. We've discussed the different possibilities on the site. We've reviewed layouts, and we've tried to identify kind of the must-haves. And then, this is really just to show an example, of the things that have happened and where we kind of are today. So I don't think there's much more we can say at the moment, but our objective from looking at this was really to kind of demonstrate that, we've done a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff that's been put together on this end. And I think it's important that we share that. Jean, you had your hand up again?
Yeah, I just kind of a small item, but I would not say that this is a subcommittee of recalc. I would say it's a working group. And that's important for a couple of reasons.
No problem.
I don't think there was ever a formal vote of who was going to be. I think it was just like, okay, who wants to work on this?
Yeah,
thing?
no, agreed.
Which there's a lot of reasons why that wants to be a distinction.
And John, you may want to say the Walgreens site working group, just to be.
Okay. And so the last slide is just next step. We're still collecting and analyzing more data. We are supposed to come back with a recommendation that's specifically, that's our primary charter. And then, give that information to the select board and let them figure out where we go from here. You know, again, as much as I think we wanted to talk about, you know, what our objectives are, I think we should stay focused on that. I'm not going to spend any time on this, but I just wanted to say for those looking at this package, I did put some backup slides. These are the centers visited. This is data on new versus renovation. Some of it's really old, but some of it's also relatively new and relevant. These are some of the data that were put together on benchmarking in terms of populations, operations, building features, you know, information on transportation, food prep, programmatic areas, miscellaneous questions, and again, what is our center missing? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I thought there were 6. There's only 5 slides here. So the bottom line is I think this is a 16 slide presentation at the moment. I certainly think to keep it in that kind of realm of length is probably a reasonable approach. So I'll stop there and ask for any other feedback, and then John, you can tell us how do we move forward from here with this.
Okay, so feedback to John. First of all, thank you very much. You and Ron, like I said at the beginning, did an outstanding job. Really appreciate it.
So what do you want us to do at this point? I know there's a couple of other placeholders that I'd like to fill in, but other than that, I mean, I'd certainly like Mark to look at this, you know, to get his perspective. You know, unfortunately, he's not here tonight, but as the select board liaison, he can also give us some guidance on what we may be missing or what we should focus on. But
why don't we give a drop dead date by which people have any additional comments, because people may not had the time to look at it in depth, you know, prior, and certainly for Mark as well. We, you know, I agree. We definitely would want to get input from him. So when would you?
We're not going to meet between now and next Wednesday, so I think the answer has to be that. I mean, I'll save this and update it and send it to Jenna so she can share it with everybody else, and then we can make an action that people need to get back to me by, you know, Saturday with any feedback, and so that I can, you know, over the weekend make any final fixes, and then, you know, give it to Jean and Jenna to take forward next week. Michael, you had.
And basically, I mean, overall, I think this is just an outstanding presentation. The one slide that I find most interesting, and I think is a potential trap, is the current usage slide. It's a very interesting slide, but I'm not sure how we want to characterize what that data means, and I'm trying to think about it, and it's not clear to me yet what that all means. So, and I'm afraid when you get to the select board, that's going to be a key piece of information for them.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's why in some respects I think Mark would be able to give us a little bit more guidance on that. But I think we do have some more work to do on that slide. I mean, I got a couple good pieces of feedback tonight. You know, I certainly can take a stab at, you know, I don't know, guiding it a bit more in terms of what we think we can pull out of this. But I think the answer is there's not I mean, we don't have any definitive, even with that data, I don't think there's a definitive answer to anything per se. So, Jean, go ahead. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I want to echo what Michael just said. I understand that everybody wants to see numbers on utilization. I get that. But we don't have good data for all the reasons we've talked about. We are coming out of this pandemic. We're going into now the winter months. It's shaky. For me, I'd rather not put numbers up there and just talk more high level about, we're not fully reactivated. All of the lunch program was a daily lunch. That's not reactivated. We're still carefully reintroducing things. So even to compare data now to, year over year or pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, it doesn't align. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we are constrained. We're constrained on a number of levels with the pandemic, with the resources, with the space, and that's really, for me, the story.
But you can't have it both ways, though. We can't be tossing out a high number that I've seen tossed out. It was over 1,000 people utilizing the center or whatever. We can't be using that kind of figure and then not use when people going to ask questions. Then I would think from that.
Yeah, I think, again, I still think this is my opinion. It's a snapshot. I think Jean's correct. There's a lot of caveats to this that I think we need to be honest about and clear about it. I think we're going to get the question. I think we should be upfront and show them the data. And I think we should, take our knocks, but also tell them why. I think there's other information that I'm hoping to garner out of the survey. I would like to see, well, how many of the people on the survey said that they go out of town for services? I think that would be a really interesting number to know, to get a feel for, this isn't just about what we think we have today for usage, but what potentially it could be, as well as what the community is viewing this to be. Because to Jean's point, we're so constrained that there may be people that would use the center, but they can't because either they're, whether it was pandemic related, whether it was because the programs aren't being offered, whether because, they're capped out based on usage. There's all sorts of reasons there. I guess I would err on the side of, we need to be transparent. And so I think we should share the information, but I do think we should caveat it and be clear about what we think it is. Just my opinion. Certainly others can chime in.
See, I would think, though, that we would, on the meals thing, because I think Jean has a good point there. It's apples and oranges there, because you had it every day of the week, and if that's never been resumed, it's my understanding. So I think we could say that.
Yep.
That's fine. I mean, show it what it is, but show that's a reason for that. And use that as a good example of some other issues with the data.
We can't even do that. We don't even have a functional kitchen. So, I mean, that's part of it.
No, but the Mystic Valley Elder Services would have provided meals there.
Okay.
People, I certainly heard criticism of those meals with people. But
yeah,
right, that was going on it's supposed to have been 5 days a week, but
Ron, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm going to have to echo Jean and Michael on this. I'm willing to bet that the meeting focuses just on this slide versus all the other. And quite frankly, I don't think we've done enough work with these numbers as much as we've done with all the other things we've done. And I really want to highlight all of the other things that Recalc has been doing versus these numbers that we really haven't digested enough. And to present them we're not even the experts on these numbers. I mean, Jenna and her team and people at maybe the Council on Aging has better numbers than we do, really, to validate these. I think it's a trap slide. I really do. And I'd like to highlight more of what we've really focused on, which is collecting information, collecting feedback, doing outbound communications, evaluating sites.
What if we added a recommendation at the end of the slide, which, I mean, this is to some extent, I'm not entirely sure this is completely outside of our scope, to be honest with you. But I do agree with you. This is really the first time we've had a chance to even see this.
Right.
So we really haven't had a chance to digest it or really go through it. So what about a recommendation in next steps to do a little bit more deeper dive into? Because I apologize. This is the one question I continue to get consistently from everybody I talk to. And I mean, I can see this on town meeting floor coming up and us being like deer in the headlights because we're not ready to answer the question. So as much as I agree with you, Ron, and I'm certainly willing to take it, I would certainly be fine with taking it out. I think if we think we're gonna skate by without addressing this in general, I think we're kidding ourselves.
Now, unless we have, well, let's say we have another work group that dives into these numbers and comes up with the right numbers, and we've done really due diligence on here. I just don't think we have yet.
Look,
So
let me just see if I'm, if I've heard correctly though, John. You got these numbers from this, from the staff.
So the statistics report came from Elder Services. They were presented to COA last Monday, I think. The data, the population data, which really, I mean, unfortunately isn't really that critical per se, that came right out of the enrollment study report that was published with Killam. So this is all public data. It didn't take long to go search and find it. The question is, what does it mean? And whether it's even worth us presenting at this point. And the reason, again, I put it, we put it in here is that we felt this is a piece that we're missing. But, I think, Ron raised a good point. We really haven't spent any time other than what we've just done tonight talking about this. So he's definitely right. We're not going to be able to say much beyond here's the data and here's some reasons why we think it is the way it is, but we really haven't done enough to really know what that means. To Ron's point, maybe it's best to take it out, but I think if we do take it out, I cannot, the one thing I wouldn't support is not making a strong recommendation that this information needs to be, really gone through and be ready to answer the question, especially on the town meeting floor, because it's going to come up. There's no question. It will be asked. And the last thing we're going to do is want to say, well, we don't know, because that will be DOA on the floor. Whatever the answer is for town meeting, whether we want to do something now or later, we need this data. And even if we don't think it reflects what it should, we need to know the answers to why, and we need to be able to explain that to people, because that's the question they want to know. Michael, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, John, that we're going to be asked about this information. And I think for the select board, this presentation for the select board, keep this slide in and just say, this is where we are in understanding this information. There's so many caveats about what this information really means that we can't all fill in, that we're still working on. But in terms of the select board, this is where we're going. We're getting the data. We will have it at some point. But we need to understand this a little bit more before town meeting. That's for sure.
Yep.
But also, I understand, I think we could say too, is I thought I read that there were 20 different programs, and these are just the, some of the major ones. So there's.
This is just well, I took the verbiage right off the slide. Statistics are the most frequent, not representing them all. So.
Right. So I think we can also say that this is not the total number, but this is gives it, an idea. And most of the things a lot of the things here are things that will be limited by capacity. The larger programs, by definition, that you're going to have an issue with capacity.
Right. And this is also probably the senior center restarting up. So
Oh, definitely.
So it's 59 meals in June and 103 in September. That's a big difference. I'm not sure.
Oh, and I think it's going to increase dramatically once they have a regular
I would think so as well. But that's just, I think this data is fine, that we can say that the population data is what it is. And that's understandable. And this usage data is useful, but we just have to say that there's lots of caveats to this. And getting people back in the center is not a trivial exercise. But
Gene,
if you have crappy meals, people won't come. So
Gene, before you jump back in, I guess I just want to ask John before I guess I would just say that while I think this data is important, I recognize that we really haven't done enough due diligence on it. If we really feel that way, I would be concerned leaving it in, because someone's got to talk to it, because the questions are going to come if you leave it up there. So maybe it's better to take it out and then just leave it as an action that, we know that there's been some usage data that we really want to look at, and we still think that's a valuable piece to add to this.
But as long as we keep in all those dollar comparisons and staffing and those kinds
That's
of.
all. Yeah, that's all.
That's all good. Yeah.
That's all. In there. Yeah. Those
Okay.
All right, Gene, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So,
Yeah, no, I was,
okay.
sorry, I was just gonna say, if you were to really take a snapshot and pick 4 categories, I'll say, and say, these are the 4 areas that we thought were worth looking at, because transportation, support services, the things that are most continuous between now and the pandemic, like the meals, there's no comparison. And maybe then we can go back in time and say, what was it like before, and really look at the numbers, apples for apples. So support services, transportation, the fitness and exercise, and maybe the social, recreational, whatever. And just pick those 4 categories, for example. I'm not saying that's, and then the total people served, I think, is important. And now you're just looking at a limited view of categories and saying, we really need to do a little more work on this to dig into it a little bit more. But these are what these 4 months have shown.
Yeah, it's up to the committee. I mean, I could go either way. I just feel the person that's going to be presenting this, which is most likely not going to be me.
Probably will. I'm thinking. See, I was thinking of asking you to present. I mean, I'm certainly going to be there, but you did so much work on this, John.
Let's talk about that offline. Yeah, I see, I would be more comfortable with the caveats than the data, to be honest with you.
okay.
And if that's the case, I'd almost not want to present it, if that's how we feel. So I'd say if we're not comfortable enough with that, then I would say forego that and just make it an action and add it on our list of things to look at over the next month or so to try to figure out where this is. And because we don't have any of this old data, and we don't know what we could make out of it. And yeah, I think, maybe in retrospect, this was a bit of a forced thing. Okay, only because, like I said, people have been asking this question. And I think we're not going to get away with not answering it, but I do think we need to spend maybe some more time on it.
Well, the one piece that I would like to continue, and it was on the select board yesterday, is that they did show, the population growth and the current population percentage of ages. It's probably still something to include in there. So maybe something like that can still be included in there.
Yeah.
That came right out of the enrollment study, and that's
Yeah.
actually where Fidel, I think Fidel took the data from the original UMass study. So I think this is a bit more accurate relative to the more recent stuff, but it's not.
Still disputing these numbers as well and projections.
I don't think to be honest with you, looking at I don't think these really shock anybody. I don't think there are things. I mean, we see what the percentages are going.
Right.
You can see the progression of ages as it goes through the years, kind of where they move. I mean, I do think people could argue and poke holes in this too, because there literally were 30 assumptions in the data set. I mean, it was I'm not even sure I agree with all of them, but there were 30 assumptions that they put forth in terms of how they came up with these assessments for the enrollment. So, putting that aside, I mean, showing this doesn't really, to be honest with you, the more important information on this is the PSC usage data. Population is a little bit less critical in my mind relative to what we're trying to view. I think people have already asked and answered that question and are less concerned with that.
Jean and Janet, does the senior center have to put out a annual report of some sort?
We do an annual report, the town annual report, and Elder Human Services is one piece of that. But we don't drill down into any kind of detail as far as, I think, like what this slide is pointing to.
So John, we still have a few other things on the
Right, yes, I'm mindful of that. It's getting late.
So I guess I would suggest, can we just take a quick poll? Do people think we should keep it in or take it out?
Okay, so, and a yes would be to take it out, a no would be to leave it in. So Nora Bucko.
Yes.
Okay, Ron Assini,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
John Sasso.
Yes.
See, I would say John O'Neill, no.
You're presenting, John, so it's your decision.
No, it isn't my decision. Already rules. I would never do that.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we'll take it out and
Backup slide.
yeah, the backup slide. I'll take it out and I'll put a note in the next steps. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I will take
Good
that.
job, John. Good job.
And no, thanks, Ron. I mean,
Yeah, you put a lot into it.
Ron, if you like the format and the way it looks, Ron, that's all Ron. He took care. It looks so much better. It was brutal. So thank you very, very much for helping and putting some of the other information together. It was very helpful. All right.
Action steps by Saturday. Have any other comments?
Yeah, I'm gonna PDF this up. I'll send it out to Jenna probably around midnight tonight when I get back to it. And if you can just send it back out to folks so they can, if they have any comments between now and Saturday, then I'll try to buckle up any more pieces and then get them to those guys over the weekend or Monday.
Okay, the communications update. It was only 16 pages, John. I mean, you're slipping.
I know. Well, I'm not sure so in terms of priorities, in terms of what's left on the agenda, the communications update really, I think everybody saw the plan that was attached. All I did was update the plan with the most recent activities, including the select board presentation and the town meeting summary that Jean had put together, and just tried to get that up to date. So I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it unless anybody has any questions. Again, going back to the presentation, I think it was I'd like to think that the plan helped us in terms of keeping us on track and what things we needed to do. And I'll continue to keep it up to date to reflect, kind of a status of what we did and where we are. So unless anybody has any comments on that, I would suggest we move on.
Okay, Jean?
Yeah, the one comment that I had was somewhere towards the end, I think if I'm remembering this correctly, there was a note about going back to town meeting for funding of the feasibility study.
Yeah, that was the original plan.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know if we wanted to maybe give that a little more thought because we have the funding for the feasibility study.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll take a look at it. I think I hope what you see is that as we've kind of gone through this, I've kind of updated it to reflect what we actually were doing. So I didn't think too much about it. I just said, that we're going to go to town meeting at some point. So yeah, I can look at that and make it a bit more clear. I still don't entirely know. I don't think anybody entirely knows what it is we're going to present at town meeting in November. So that's I think that's still to some extent a certain question. I mean, I know what the warrant says, but I'm still not sure if that's really going to happen. So anyhow.
So you mean the report of the committee to
The
town
report of
meeting?
the committee is done. That
Right.
I think that's done, right? So that's already gone into
Oh,
the warrant.
you're referring to Article 19?
Yeah, I'm referring to
Okay.
Article 19. Yeah, no.
Is
no.
that a recalc thing or is that a select board thing?
It's a select board thing.
board.
It's
Okay.
not a, yeah, it's not a
Yeah.
recalc thing.
Okay.
No, the
That's what I
report,
thought.
the town meeting report, I think that I identified that as a separate line item, and that's pretty much done.
And that article might turn out just to be a placeholder, and
I
don't
think
know
we
what's
know.
gonna happen. It won't be up to us to decide. Okay, anything else for input to John Sasso? Thank you again, John.
You're welcome.
Okay, UMass updates. Now, is that, Jean, where are we? So is there's a meeting scheduled, right?
Yes, it is. The original scope of work, which I know everybody weighed in on, approved. I think the committee, one of their first acts was to approve the scope. And that scope outlined the survey by UMass and then a presentation to the select board. And those were sort of the last two pieces left. And we had queued that up for, the fall. You remember we spent a lot of time thinking about what was the best time to deploy the survey. And everyone agreed waiting until after Labor Day was the right time to do it. And so we had absolutely no intention of having results in time for town meeting. We made that decision early on. Well, that changed. And that's life, right? So the wild card of Walgreens entered into the formula. And so then it became, as we discussed at the last meeting, wait, we need information for town meeting. We need to go back to the select board in October and let's see if we can get things moving. So thankfully, when I reached out to UMass about giving us a preview of the survey results in an October select board meeting, they were amenable to it based on the short list of questions that I think everyone has had a look at. There were about 11 of them. So that wasn't as challenging as it could have been. They could have pushed back, and they were very nice about being helpful and doing that. So that worked out. As a planner, that's not my favorite way of going about things, but as I say, this is life. So we will have UMass give their preview of the survey results based on that short list of questions the same night that Recalc gives their update to the select board. So I believe Recalc is going to go first, and then UMass is going to go next and talk about these survey results just on that 11 questions. So that's October 25th. And they're probably only going to give a 10-minute presentation. It's not going to be much on what they are reporting out on the survey. The final presentation and the final analysis is scheduled to be given to the select board on December 6th. And the idea was that it would be a joint meeting, select board, Recalc, Council on Aging. We talked about that at the last meeting, rather than having UMass go individually to each board, have one collective meeting with the three boards at the select board for UMass to give the final report. And that again is scheduled for December 6th. And then that's it. The question about when recalc should sunset. Right now, recalc sunsets November 30th. So that is misaligned with a December 6th joint meeting. So some work needs to be done there.
We can just be there as private citizens.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where we're at.
Questions on that? It's really okay. The discussion of lunch and learn presentation of Walgreens. And I'm not sure who put that on the agenda, Jenna.
I think we kind of already talked about that in the first part of this meeting more than anything, right?
What happened?
It's
Yes.
really, yeah, we really kind of, merged into from that. There was a lot of discussion, so I'm not necessarily sure what else is left to talk about that. Or
Okay. Anybody feel the need to say anything more about that? This is your last opportunity. Okay, thank you. Now it's time to make sure that assignments needing follow-up. We certainly had the people getting back to John by Saturday. That's one follow-up. We still have to make a final decision on presentation, who's doing it at October 25th. And maybe John and I can talk offline about that, about how to do that. John, for people who don't know, is the vice chair of Recalc. So, and Ron, well, that's going to be actually posted as a Recalc meeting. So all Recalc members are welcome to go to that select board presentation. And Marilyn can decide whether she wants to do this similar thing for this COA. That's totally up to you.
Please. Yes.
Okay, Jenna, did you catch that? Posted as a
As
COA?
recalc and COA.
Yes.
You got it.
Thank you.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay. Anything else that we need to be follow up coming out of this meeting?
we just had a relatively long discussion about center usage data. I'd like us to, see if we can figure out a way to continue to collect that information, maybe look at some of the prior history and figure out what it is that we can actually say eventually. So,
if people recall, we got some information from Kevin, December or
yeah,
January.
I know Kevin at some point said he was going to share some data, and I apologize.
I do have it. I mean, I have seen it in my extensive Recalc file, so I'll try to, look that up as well. But he did give us some data.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have one or two people kind of take a look at that and with some fresh eyes, and figure out what it says and what it is that what we can say about it potentially.
All right, suggestions on how we proceed to do that? I just don't want that to drop. Should we have let's get a sense of members. Should we have a little working group to do that? Maybe working with Amy and whomever, or do you want to do it via you, Jenna? How would you like us to proceed with any members that are going to?
Sure. We could all work together. There's some staff in Human and Elder Services that are great at utilizing the My Senior Center, and we could pull past data pre-COVID and compare it to data now and try to dig deeper to get some information. And if we have trouble finding appropriate information, we can reach out to neighboring towns on how to collect specific data that you may need. So I'm happy to join someone on Recalc.
I'd be willing to be on it. Anybody else interested? Okay, Michael and Michael Colton. Okay, Jenna.
Great. Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Any other new business that just came up within the last 48 hours that wasn't able to be posted? That's new? Seeing none, there usually isn't anything, but just, I figured I would ask.
Just one question or comment. I think it was in the packet. I had written up a summary of the site visits that we did, which is kind of
Yes.
what the data that I presented was based on. Again, it was one of my actions that have been open for a while, so I apologize for not getting through that. But if folks do have a chance to look at that and want to share any feedback or questions on that, all the data came off the spreadsheet that everybody has had access to for the last probably 3 or 4 months anyhow. So there shouldn't be any surprises in the information, in that it's just a collection of, in summary, of the data that came off those sheets. And those were all based on the actual PDF sheets that were in the packets back in March, April timeframe. So it was just an attempt to kind of put the information in a more usable format. So if folks want to look at that and have any questions or comments, by all means, feel free to share. But that's all that is.
Okay.
Ron,
Ron,
you-
do you have a hand up there? Yes, Ron.
So it looks like we missed the communications update from John Sasso. Is there anything additional, John, that we haven't already said?
Oh, he had that report.
No, I just submit, you probably saw in the packet an updated communication plan, which I've just kind of tried to keep up to date. There's nothing new I've added in pieces now that we've kind of gone to the select board review, the town meeting report, and I just tried to keep it up to date so that it's complete. Whether we have anything further we're going to pull out of there, that's something we can talk about, but no, there's nothing new in there.
There's no other new newsletter or anything coming up?
Well, we do have a newsletter in there, but for the next set of things, but we haven't put that together yet. I think to be honest with you, we're still kind of struggling with the things we're working on now. And
Yep.
so I didn't open the plan back up, but I do believe there's at least one more newsletter, if not two, actually, I think, that we had planned into the effort, which is why I think, there's a lot more work that we still have to do here in terms of communication. So it's not all going to happen, quickly.
Yep.
And some of it may be more after the fact, but yes, there are in the communication plan, there are tactics to put out some more newsletters.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay. Seeing nothing else, the next meeting. All right. I guess the question is it worthwhile trying to squeeze something in before the select board meeting, or just, we got a lot to digest there, or waiting till after?
Yeah.
My schedule over the next couple of weeks is going to be batty crazy. I don't think we're going to have an opportunity between now and the select board meeting to meet again. I'm not sure there's necessarily a need to, unless people want to really scrutinize what we put together in terms of a presentation, but I think we're pretty close on that.
When is town meeting again?
14th of November, I think.
November 14th it starts. Yep.
Yeah.
So we have to meet after select board meeting and before town meeting. Yeah.
Right.
The 14th, the 17th, the 21st, and the 28th.
Yeah.
Oh, and do we know what date we're going to go on, or how's that work?
That's, if you're talking about Article 19, I think there's 22 articles. So
23 articles.
So it's up to the town moderator, how he wants to go in sequence. And we typically have a pre-town meeting to kind of, because sometimes, let's say the school department wants to take it on a certain night or whatever. That's up to the town to the moderator, how he wants to organize things.
How about November 2nd?
Okay.
So just so everyone's aware, this meeting on November 1st at the library should be on your calendars. And it probably
It's a
wants
forum meeting.
yet another posting for Jenna, to make sure everyone's posted, at that big, I think it's meant to be a big forum at the library to share everything so far on the site we refer to as Walgreens.
Is that what that meeting is, or is that the sharing of feedback on ADA usage and guidance for design and things like that? I thought, am I confusing the two, or is it supposed to be?
I think it's both, John.
I think it is both, yeah.
Okay.
Because I think, when there was some concern about, well, gee, we haven't seen these plans that were shown at this luncheon, and then it was, okay, well, they were shown at the select board the other night, but not everybody saw them. So I think just continuing the conversation of everything to date, including the accessibility
Right.
issues, is the goal, and before town meeting, so all the information is made available with all the boards.
Is that 7 to 9 as well?
Ooh. Not sure.
They set a time? Yeah.
I haven't seen anything official, so I don't want to misspeak.
Okay.
All right, so we got October 25th, November 1st, and we need to have December 6th, and now we're talking about a recalc on November 2nd, just so we're clear. November 2nd would be a regular recalc. It could be the last regular recalc. So let's make sure, well, I think of it, Jenna, the recommendation probably at that point, or at least we should begin the serious discussion, if not come to the final recommendation on senior center versus the intergenerational. We will have gotten some information from UMass on the 25th, right?
Preliminary information on the 25th.
Right.
Well, we're not, I mean, I was just thinking, so we're going to do the presentation on the 25th, and then UMass is going to step in after us and present data that's going to completely go against what we have. No, only kidding. Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything we can really say, until we see that. I think it would be helpful that if we have a recalc meeting scheduled before town meeting, if in fact there's something that we need to be prepared for, or some of the information, or at least have some reaction to what potentially we heard from UMass. So I think it's worth that. That would be my recommendation. I know there's a lot of other things going on, and I'm not even sure what my availability is going to be over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I think
the 2nd is what you're saying, Joe, right?
Yeah, well, that's because the 14th is a town meeting, so we don't really have. We either have the 2nd or the 9th, and
that's, yeah,
from my perspective, I think the 9th would be too late. But
I agree.
Gene, is an action item to see if we have to extend the charge for recalc to another month or so, or is that something we should be considering?
So that's something that we talked to Mark about, and I think it's up to the select board to act on that, because this is an ad hoc committee that the select board established with a sunset of November 30th. And I did hear Fidel mention it again last night at the select board meeting. So I think the select board is aware. Mark, I know we've talked about it, so
Should we put it as a follow-up?
It wouldn't hurt. Certainly wouldn't hurt.
I can add it on the last slide as a next steps, extend recalc. So
Yeah. And Mark may already have something going on, have some way of dealing with that. I don't know.
Just checking once again as far as November 2nd to make sure we have a quorum, because there's only 5 people. Michael's saying yay. Nora? November 2nd? Okay.
Yeah.
John has already indicated. Ron?
Yes.
And I can make it. Okay. Great, so that's our next meeting. And before I adjourn, just thank everybody once again, including the additional people who signed in. Thank you as well. And so roll call for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
No. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
And non-debatable, Nora.
Yes.
Yes. John Sasso,
Yes.
Ron Assini,
Yes.
Michael
Yes.
Coleman, and John O'Neill, yes. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
And all.